All right, all right. What's going on, guys? This is a special episode of How to Be Funny. I just called Nelson just randomly because I was really trying to figure out this bit about Louis C.K. Uh, Louis C.K. had this bit in his Live at the Comedy Store about Monopoly versus Candyland. And, when we talk about joke writing, we talk about setup, punch, breaking expectations, different tricks, puns, what do you call it? Pullback and reveals. There's so many different ways to for the math of jokes. And so when I was looking at that bit written out, there was none of that, right? There's a compare and contrast uh, between when you play Candyland with your kids versus when you play Monopoly with your kids. And the basic joke is that Candyland is something that kids can handle, versus Monopoly is not something you should play with your kids because it's really really dark, right? Um, and so I was going through it line by line, and I really couldn't pinpoint exactly, like, okay, like what, there's no surprise, there's no tricks in it, right? And so I wanted to call Nelson to like actually understand or get his perspective on, like, okay, like what is this bit about, like why is it so funny, like when you watch it you can't help but laugh. And so we kind of talked for the last like 20 minutes about character and persona and the importance of it, right? So, Nelson, if you just want to rehash a little bit of what we talked about.
Thank you very much, Schmidt. So today we talked about the importance of character. The bit that Mitt is talking about, I guess you send a link to the Louis C.K. transcribe. So basically, we're talking about how some at some point in a comedian's character, they have to develop a voice. You know, when you think about the comedians that stand out or your favorite type of comedians, they all have that way you describe them. Like Dave Chappelle, you're like, oh, that's that funny, cool black guy that lives down the road. I can just picture that character living in my hood. You can talk about how when you look at Dave Chappelle, you can tell even amongst his friends, he's the funniest guy. So there's this thing that comedians exude where every joke they tell has a feeling to it. They have a certain aspect. So we're talking in regards to there's certain comedians that they can do 6 jokes, or when you hear a joke that they've told, you can say, okay, that sounds like a Dave Chappelle joke. That sounds like a Chris Rock joke. That's because it has their voice in those jokes, as opposed to comedians where their jokes can be told by different people. They just write jokes in such a detached way where they can be, there's no aspect of personality to them. So we're basically talking about the difference between those two aspects of comedy, how to have material that reflects your voice, or have your personality to them, where you start developing a voice and jokes that sound just like you, jokes where people are like, okay, I relate to that sort of thing, the inner voice. So it's basically developing that inner voice.
Yeah, yeah. And I think coming up, I really heard that too, is like, when you're at open mics, you hear a bunch of people trying to become their favorite comedians, and then later on when you see the people that are pretty successful, they become themselves on stage, right? And so I think there was a Ted Alexandro talk that we did on the other podcast that I'm a part of, Hot Breath, and he talked about this. He said if you write for 2 hours a day at least, and you're really reflecting on what you think about and how you think and why you think and all these different types of things, you start to like really delve deep into like who you are as an individual. And then when you can bring that person on stage, it's authentic, and you get to actually, the audience gets to experience who you are as a person. And if that jives with something they've seen on TV or someone that they know, that becomes part of your character, is my understanding of this. And, you know, then going back to the whole Louis C.K. bit, we know Louis C.K. as this guy that has kids, but he doesn't like, I mean, he likes his kids, but in his head, he's like, I'm annoyed of these kids, right? That's his character. And so when he plays that through, um, like in this Louis C.K. bit, it's in this Candyland versus Monopoly bit, it's really funny because he's like, the punch of the joke is, I'm gonna destroy you in Monopoly. Like, I don't know what to tell you, and I'm gonna enjoy all of it, you know. Um, and it's so on brand for him that it makes us laugh, right? And yeah, so my other question to Nelson was, okay, so how does a comedian first start to figure out what their voice is? And he has an exercise.
So the exercise we're going to do today is we're going to take 10 words that describe us. So how this started for me personally was I was talking to my friend Arthur, and it was one of the early days in which I was developing my character. At that point, I was just writing jokes and just doing them in an order where, you know, they felt detached. They could easily have been told by someone else. It was still funny, you know, don't get me wrong, but then they needed to go to that, they needed that extra tuning, that extra juice, that extra secret sauce that makes them feel like my joke. So I started thinking, how do I come up with this extra flavor? How do I come up with this extra thing, this voice? How do I make myself consistent to the point where the jokes that I tell no longer just feel detached? They start feeling they have an aspect of my personality throughout them. You know, I have my character nailed on in every joke, where even when I'm not necessarily using punchlines, just me describing the situation is funny because I'm reiterating my character in those descriptions or in that bit, which is the same thing that Louis C.K. does in that bit. Because even though it doesn't seem like there are punchlines every time he's talking, when you watch the bit on YouTube, every time he finishes a line, there's a joke, you know, he doubles down, and that's consistent with his character, with his voice, you know. So, and the example that we gave is that if John Mulaney were to do the same joke, he'd be apologizing for beating the kid at Monopoly, you know, so, which is consistent with his character, unless it's going to surprise me because it's a comedian. But then again, you know, so basically my point is that expectation that you set up as you build your character on stage.
God. So can you walk me through like how you build your character on stage?
Well,
I just saw your animal lover special.
yeah.
Super funny. Um, and so yeah, I just wanted to see, like, you know, there are some of your classic jokes that you've told in the past or whatever.
Yeah.
How did you decide like which ones would go in that special, and like how it built your character in that set?
So how I always start with a set is I always try to visualize it. I
Right.
feel like visualization is the first step. If you cannot visualize it, you're going in dark, you don't have a reference point, blah, blah. And a lot of the time, the visualization actually works because if you've done it for X amount of, you know, years or X amount of times, you're going to know the beats that are going to get reactions. And if it works out how you've predicted, you know where to double down, where to increase the energy, which type of jokes to put where. So for me, it's mostly to do with the energy. So when I looked at that bit, like I realized I needed to be funny for 45 minutes. But in order to do that, I needed to capture their attention. So how do you tell a story? You start off with bangers, like, you know, that very visual start, because a lot of it is really storytelling. But how I visualized it, first and foremost, is I visualized it as a funny conversation that I'm going to have with, let's say, like someone who's going to come to the show, like my boss or my friend, you know. So a funny conversation. So anything that would not be consistent with that conversation I would have had with them at that point would not make it to the show. So that's why some jokes, like, of course, I did make a few dirty jokes in there, but there were some that I had to leave out because, you know, I felt like it wouldn't come up in a conversation with this person. So I use the conversation aspect of it to guide me through the writing process. So as I visualized it, I started, writing it as I write a story. Like, you start off with like really visual jokes like that make everyone like relax. Cause I feel like once you get like really strong laughs to start a show, people can be like, oh, okay, it's gonna be funny tonight. So let's relax. Like, let us all relax. Like, we're gonna be here 45 minutes, but he seems to have it under control. So let us relax. So I had to start off with them type of jokes, like really hyper. Then
So is
after,
that like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you off, but is that like the bus joke? Like which jokes were those like bangers? And that did they have anything to do with building the character, or was that just like, I know what I'm doing, here's your first laughs, and then you have to get into character?
so the latter is correct. So I had to just say, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
How I try to look at it is like, it's like being a pilot. So the pilot doesn't want to sound like he's unsure about flying the plane, right? So you want to let them know as we're lifting off, like, okay, I got it. Everyone relax. And once we've now had enough laughs, we're now at that autopilot. I can then start talking about myself. I'm relaxed, you're relaxed, everyone is relaxed. So we can now get into the story. So it's, of course, like I use the aeroplane analogy, but it's really, I call them type of jokes openers.
Yeah.
Everyone calls them openers, but for me, the way I write them is I have to make sure there's like like 4 or 5 guaranteed like laughs to wake everyone up within the first few jokes that I do. So, and then after they've laughed, after they've been like, okay, at least we are laughing, he knows what he's doing, then I can start telling my story from day one, blah blah blah, and then the show literally that's the rest of the show.
Got it. And so, okay, if I remember correctly, you have the my name is Nelson Tinashe Gombakomba Jr. And that is the that's not the longest thing about me, right?
I say that's the shortest thing about it.
That's the shortest thing about me, catches. That's the shortest. Yeah, sorry for messing up your jokes, but so okay, that's
Say,
Banger One,
yeah.
and then you have Mr. Chang,
Yeah.
and then you have the lady breastfeeding in the bus, right? And then you have 3 bangers, which are amazing, and then you start to set up your character.
Yes.
All right. So what was the first joke that you were like, okay, this is the character that I am, so here it is. This is like a bit.
So I talk about how I'm from Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
That's the first way I describe myself. I'm like, I'm from Zimbabwe. If I'm in a conversation with someone, that's probably one of the first things they're gonna ask. And I'm like, if I'm from Zimbabwe, how did I get here? I'm clearly not from here. I'm a foreigner. Was I born here? Did I come here? Blah blah blah. And now the jokes start pointing you in the right direction. Now, after how did I get here? What I do is,
What is that character? There is like, I'm from Zimbabwe. You're just describing that you're a foreigner that came to London.
well, what I'm doing with those jokes is I am painting the picture. So I'm still setting up the background. It's like a flashback, so that as I go deeper into joke 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you now understand, okay, so he's already explained about where he's from. So now we can move on. And
Okay.
after that, after I've told them about where I'm from, I can talk about what did I do after I go here? So that takes me to the school days. And what happens when you're in school? Playground shit. You start talking to girls, that sort of thing. So naturally, dating is going to come afterwards. So I'm going to talk about that. And then after dating, what else do I do? I went to university. I studied law, and I talk about that. So I'm trying to make sure that every aspect of me can have a joke attached to it,
Okay.
essentially. So as I go through these facts about me, and as I go through these aspects of my life, I then talk about the funny things that were going on, so that whilst the people are laughing, even though they don't care about my story, what they care about is really laughing. In the back of their heads, they actually, it's making sense to them because they're laughing about some university. But then again, why should they care? Oh, we care because it's told us how he's ended up here. So at every point of the exercise, you keep reminding themselves, like, why should they care that you're from this place? Why should they care that, that's also another aspect of it.
Got it. So why should they care? Okay. So you're basically going through the chronology of your life up to this point
Yeah.
with the first special, right? Maybe for your second special, you do something else, right? You're just catching them up with what's going on.
Yeah.
To me, that's okay. So everyone is from somewhere, went to school, dated, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
How are you making it unique to your character and saying, hey, audience, this is who I am, right? Like,
So as I go through these jokes,
yeah.
I use callbacks to earlier jokes as well, so that they know they have to pay attention and that everything is connected. They love callbacks. But one of the things that I'm doing as well is I'm telling jokes that are consistent with my character. So at that point in the set, I would have made a joke about getting chained, 50 Shades of Grey, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not inconsistent if I joke about masturbating in the library. And that sounds so crude, but it makes sense when you hear the full joke. So at that point, people are already like, ha ha ha, even though that didn't really happen,
yeah.
like, because at the end of the day, I didn't really get Jade to get with blah, blah, blah. But no one cares about that, because for that character that I'm doing on stage, I've already showed them that I like joking about things that are crazy like that. It's not weird to them. They're now just,
Got it.
enjoying.
So you brought up a good point here. So one aspect of character is what do you like joking about, right?
Yeah,
That has nothing to do with who you are as a person or where you came from or anything. It's just, what's my wheelhouse, right? So I think I understand that because you have, again, and I would argue that your bus joke is like that too, right?
mm,
Crude, sexual, 50 Shades of Grey, crude, sexual, and then the library, crude, sexual, right? So
yeah,
if you had to put a name to that character aspect, it would be crude, sexual. So next time you're writing jokes and you find something that's crude and sexual, you're like, all right, well, that's in my wheelhouse. That's
yeah,
definitely going in,
yeah,
right? Versus if there was something that was more like you found a real, you wrote a really nice joke, but it is more on the side of like safe sex, whatever, like something that's on the safer side, the cleaner side. You're like, well, that even though it's a funny joke, we'll leave that for like a Jim Gaffigan or whatever. That I'm not going to do that joke, right?
I took a girl out to dates, then I walked up back home, then I took it
Like, and nothing happened, folks. Like, I just went home and read a book. Like, all right, that is definitely not Nelson.
That's the thing. It has to be like, that's not him. That's him. That's not him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it. Okay. So great. So we have one aspect of character, which is what do I, as a comedian or character on stage, like to joke about? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other aspects of character are there, do you think? Like,
So, as we were talking, I thought about an exercise that people can have at
oh
home.
yeah, let's go ahead and do that exercise.
Uh, It's two questions. One is, what do I like to joke about? And question number two, why should they care?
Why should
So, what do I like to joke about? Why should they care? You know, because it might open you up to different aspects of looking at a set. Because if you really like to joke about some crazy, filthy shit,
yeah,
then to make them care, you have to make them know that it's coming from a good place. So at the beginning of your set, you need to like talk about saving a cat or something, as the great book suggests, saving a cat.
yeah,
So now I'm applying the stuff I read for my script writing to.
theater, script
Oh,
writing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very important, right? That's character.
but yeah,
Um,
if you like to joke about the really crazy stuff,
yeah,
like you're building a character, and how do you build a character? You tell the story, but then why should they care about the character? That's the thing. Why should we care about you being a nasty person? Okay, you did save a cat, so that's fine. We know deep down you're a good person, so
got it,
we can laugh at this nasty shit.
got it. And so, what's your save the cat moment in your set?
Uh, I talk about. I guess when I'm coming in, trying to I'm trying to radiate this whole laughter, like I'm all smiling. Nelson, you're sure to about me, blah, blah, blah. Then I talk about getting beaten up, then joking about getting beaten up and all this thing. So I guess at that point, I haven't saved the cat just yet. But the more I'm making fun of myself and I then start talking about Zimbabwe, you know, like how I got here. Not to say that using the race card gives you sympathy, but then people are like, okay, so okay, we understand where he's coming from, the struggles that he's had to face, his lack of privilege is my save the cat. I don't need to save the cat because I don't have that privilege. You know what I mean?
Come right out and say you're poor. If you did that, or you used to be poor, right? If you did that, then that would be like a save the cat moment. Actually, this is an interesting topic because this is where screenwriting and comedy combine.
Yes.
I don't know if our listeners actually know what Save the Cat is. So, um, it's a book by a guy named Blake Schneider, and it's kind of like it's a book when you first get into screenwriting, everyone's like, you got to read this book, blah, 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 because it really breaks down how to write a screenplay, like literally frame by frame, you know? And so there's a piece called Save the Cat, which is a very important piece because it's the first time when the audience meets a character. You gotta, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but when you watch an entire movie and a lot of fun stuff happened and a lot of cool stuff happened, but at the end you're just like, like whatever, you know. That experience comes when you're not connected with the character, right? You haven't put yourself in that character's shoes, or you're not empathizing with that character.
Yeah.
And so this whole book is really about, you know, that whole process of, writing a screenplay, but the first piece that you have to have is you have to let the audience know that I need to care about this character, right? And so it goes through a couple examples. Save the Cat is kind of like something that he tries to anchor in your mind, like when a character saves a cat from a tree and gives it to the owner, you automatically go, oh, I really like that character, that was a really nice thing to do, right? I think they have an example in As Good as It Gets, where Jack Nicholson is a complete asshole. um, he throws a dog down a garbage chute, um, and then he's like racist to some guy in the hallway of his apartment. But as soon as he closes the door of his apartment, the movie shows him being OCD, right? He has to flick the lights on a couple times, use a different bar of soap, and you're like, oh wow, like I kind of feel bad, like he has an issue, right? So there's a couple tricks like that to make an audience care about the character. In comedy, how does that translate is my question, maybe to Nelson. You know.
It depends on what act you are, and this is not me generalizing, but it all depends on how the comedian interprets themselves. Because when I try to look at comedy and try to test out these theories, I look at the goats, like the people that are considered, universally considered to be the greats. And you look at someone like Chris Rock, what's his save the cat moment? When he's coming out, he's telling you how hard it is to be black in America. He's already coming from that perspective. So you're like, he can't be a bad guy. He's here he's already had that part, you've already, he's saved, he's care,
Yeah.
you're like, he's not a bad guy. He's just, the system has been, bad to him. And so I'm here to listen, I'm understanding. And that's, to be fair, that in itself is quite a strong thing, because you look at a lot of the other different types of comedians, because I guess would a female comedian come on and tell you, listen, I've had to face this, and that because I'm a woman. And, at that point, does the audience go, okay, let us listen? I guess it's a form of saving the cat, really. It's a form of putting yourself on their level that, listen, I'm not just here to like tell you jokes or try to be funny, but, listen to me, like, let's just get the ego out of the way. Because a lot of the time, the audience is like, they're waiting, everybody's like, oh, everybody's nervous. So I
Yeah.
feel like establishing your character, like, at least that can ride you out for like a really long set, because it puts people at ease. What you say to them is consistent to how they picture you, that sort of thing. They've connected with you, basically.
That makes sense. Yeah, something to something to reflect on. So now you have three bangers. You have a save the cat joke, maybe, and then you're starting to put your character into the audience's mind, right? And so, one of the things that we said was, what do you like to joke about? Is there anything else about your character, your persona, that relates to a joke later on in your set that you think you can reflect on?
Um, what I like to joke about is, so the type of jokes that I like to tell is, I like people to think, oh, that's really smart. Oh, that's really smart, without saying I'm smart. So I like to have this aura where, and this sometimes a lot of it focuses so much on punchlines and delivery, but I want to impress you to a point where you're like, oh, damn, that was clever. And I want you to keep going, that was clever, throughout the set. I want you to think, oh, he didn't just go for the easy one. He's clever. Because in a way, mate, I'm really trying to tell them I'm clever,
Yeah.
but I'm not trying to say it directly.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more impressive if they're like, damn, man, that was clever, actually. Damn, that was clever. That was smart. Yeah. That's what I want them to keep going.
So that's two things. So you like to talk about crude, sexual, and then clever arguments. Okay,
Yeah, to balance it out.
got it.
And I feel like sometimes even as I like to talk about law as well, they can go, oh God, he's joking about dicks, but at least he's also talking about the establishment and how we're really getting oppressed by these fat cats at the top, that sort of thing. So that people are like, as you walk off the stage, um, sometimes there's people in the audience that, even though you say crude jokes, they will look past that because you have said something smart. And
Yeah.
I can't speak on behalf of anyone else, but sometimes someone will come say, be like, you know what, all that Stop your dick at the beat. That was it. But you did say that thing. So that's also one of the things that I'm aiming for. That even though I'm saying what I'm saying, I
Yeah.
also want to balance it out with something that makes you come up to me out to be like, you know what, man? I didn't like the first beat, but that other one, that would hit me laughing.
Yeah.
So,
I think that also plays into your appearance too, right? It's like how you dress, what race you are, all that kind of stuff. Like you saying you're, the funny, funny, energetic black guy.
yeah,
That just allows you to talk about sex in a free way, because that's what we see on TV all the time, right? We're indoctrinated into that kind of thing. Whereas, if any if you were dressed a different way, if you had glasses, like a different kind of look, even before you even open your mouth, would change the way an audience perceives a crude sexual joke, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Um,
And let me just say though, like the other thing about sexual humor is that it shouldn't come from a predatory side. It shouldn't make people feel creeped out.
yeah,
So for you to be able to do that, you have to be able to make sure that you are radiating the right type of energy so that the sexual humor is, accepted in the way it's intended to be delivered. Then you have to humble yourself, and like you have to be like, hey, I'm only saying this because it's funny, but I'm not saying, I like doing X, Y, Z. That sort
mhm.
of thing. So that people can be like, even your boss will be like, haha, that's stupid, but that was funny.
And I think you do a great job in that, because you're the victim in most of your sexual jokes, right? So like the bus joke, it's like you sucking on your on your wife's tits, right? In a bus, that you're just like, hey, I'm drinking milk here, why are you bothering me? And then in the 12 years of slave joke or whatever, right? Again, you're the victim, right? You're getting whipped, blah blah blah. And then in the library joke, you make it seem like you've had sex in all these different places, but you're like, I masturbated in all these. So you're the victim in every single one of these.
I'm always a victim, man.
You're always the victim, and that's a lot more what do you call it, digestible, and also a lot more relatable. Like sex is a very embarrassing thing for a lot of people, and it doesn't happen like you see it on TV or in movies most of the time, right? There's so many issues, right? And so I think that's why sexual humor is um universally it's funny. Regardless, you could say like the word penis like 3 times, and people, there doesn't even have to be a joke around it. You can just be like, penis, 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 and people will still laugh, just because it brings up like feelings that you don't want to have, so it comes out as laughter. um yeah, super interesting. um I do have one more question for you, and then you probably want to go to sleep, because I woke up in the middle of the night. But
No, no, no. We're gonna do your exercises.
the exercise, yeah, okay. So one more question, and then we can do the exercise. So how did you decide that crude sex and intelligent jokes was going to be your bag?
Because that's who I am.
That's who you are. So,
That is, that's so. But there's another aspect of it. Like so, I want people, like I said, I want people to be impressed by how smart these jokes are. But there's also a side to me that's not like, I find that funny when I shouldn't find it funny. So sexual humor is always one thing that comes into mind. But like, it's things that I genuinely find funny. So I have to find it funny. So in order for me to feel like I can radiate the same type of joy I felt when I found that funny to the audience. But it's, yeah, it's a tricky one because I kind of did that. This is who I am. But then, even though I laugh at the stupid stuff, I also laugh at the smart stuff. So it's trying to create this balance so that people, the audience, can at least appreciate, like, okay, he did talk about that filthy thing.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I'm really afraid of um, because what I laugh at with my friends is very politically incorrect stuff, um, especially in this era, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and friends of all races, and you know, all, and it's I don't know how to bring that on stage. I've tried a couple. Like I really like racial humor a lot. Like I don't know why. I just think I grew up on like so much. Like I grew up on so much black stuff like too early. You know what I'm saying? Like um, before I even listened to like any pop song ever, I listened to like underground hip hop, like old hip hop that not that many people know, like Cannabis and like this guy named J. Rue the Damager, like just
Yeah.
people that you wouldn't even recognize if you're not like a big hip hop head. And then like all the movies I watched, like I, I think I've watched every single like movie that a rapper has ever created. You know, like I've watched Fat Joe's movie.
Yeah.
The VHS was orange. It wasn't even like a black VHS. It was hilarious.
An idea. You know how I said earlier, the way I developed my personality was
Yeah.
what I find funny, why should they care? So
Yeah.
let's write that about you. You like hip hop. Now we gotta make them care that you
Yeah.
like hip hop.
Yeah. Why would they care?
Why should they
I,
care?
I saved a rapper from a tree once.
This talk about
I took him down from a tree. I took a ladder. I was just like, it's okay. It's okay. um, yeah.
yeah,
How do you make people care about what you
you
like in music? That doesn't make sense. I don't know.
well, how? Because you wanna joke about that, but tell us why should we care? Why should
Oh,
we care about
because
these
my
things?
that's how I bonded with my best friend when I was younger.
Again, now you're opening up. Do you see the
Yeah.
beauty in these questions?
Yeah. Yeah, no, my friend, you know, my best friend, he had some cousins in New York, and you know, he got that from them and then brought it to me, and you know, together we just really liked black culture. It was just like basketball, hip hop, black movies, black comedy, like everything was just completely that way, you know, and we bonded over it, so that's why.
And why? What was it about that culture that fascinated you more than your own culture? Now you have to do comparison. Why?
Because if you look at my baby picture, like when I'm not baby pictures, but like when I'm like 4 or 5 or 6 years old, I'm dressed like a nerd. It's like just I don't know. It's I've always felt like a nerd, and like everyone in all these movies and all the like, it just makes you feel cool, and you wish you were that way, and blah blah blah. So I've always felt like um you know, I never felt like the cool guy ever, you know, even though
So,
sometimes I was perceived as the cool guy, but never ever did I feel like, yeah, man, what's up? How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. You know, like never felt like I had swag. So,
that is funny. Now you're saving your cat. You
right.
did talk
Yeah.
about how you you never had swag. People be like, man, I can relate to that because I know a homie that doesn't have swag. I got a cousin that doesn't have swag.
Yeah. Okay. I got it.
That's you being vulnerable to the audience. Now, even though you don't go in this direction
Yeah.
eventually, I can at least give you options to consider
This is
through
good. Yeah.
that. because essentially you're saving the kid.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is May. I didn't have no swag.
Yeah, definitely could make some jokes
So I became a cultural appropriator.
about
You could talk about cultural appropriation.
I could talk about cultural appropriation, yeah, but I could argue that it is my culture too,
Yeah,
because I knew that more than Indian culture, really.
that's
Yeah, so that's interesting. Wow, big revelation.
Hey,
Yeah,
this
because
is
the way
okay.
I tried to bring out the racial humor was through, I did a set probably like 3 months ago, and right around that time it was like riots and all that stuff happening, right? And so my I had gone home that weekend and I talked to my parents about this kind of stuff. And just immigrants in general are just racist. They just are, like racist against all cultures, their own culture. Like it, it's just rampant and it's accepted. That's probably why I also like race humor, is because that's just how I grew up as well.
You go well.
Um, but yeah, so like I tried to talk about, how I was trying to tell my mom, like, hey, this is not okay. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world. You got to change your world views and whatever. Um, and it went over okay. But in the same time, I was still making like, Mexicans put up drywall jokes and, like all that kind of stuff, just because it makes me laugh. I don't know. Yeah, it just does.
Why, why should they care that you find racial humor funny? Because it, it is funny. You gotta give them an example. Like, listen, guys, I don't want you to think I'm racist, but isn't this shit hilarious? Do y'all see this shit too? Am I the only one that notices this shit?
The problem with the audience today is like racial humor is like it's like a cornerstone of comedy.
Yeah.
Two, a Jew, a Christian, and whatever walk into a bar, or a black guy and a white guy walk into a bar, whatever, right? It's all it's all been part of comedy, but only like in the last 2 years or 3 years have people been like, nope, racial humor is not okay. It's like, what? How? When? Why? That's crazy, you know?
No, you're right. But I think I found out the reason why the other day. See, the most powerful group in the world right now in terms of like audience members are the liberals.
Yeah,
So they can censor you. Of course, there are comedians that are so funny they can, go. You can't cancel them, but
yeah.
I find that a lot of society is moving towards that liberalism. So, ooh,
I
it's
think
good.
there's a rift though, right? Because there were a lot of people that did you see Bill Burr's SNL
Yeah, I saw some of it. Yeah,
monologue, right?
yeah,
Totally, he was like he told that line of sexism. Well, he always talks about like women suck, blah 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 blah, right?
yeah.
But he told the line of racism, homophobia, and sexism so well. Still, people on Twitter were like, cancel Bill Burr or whatever, whatever. But there was a huge amount of people that were just like, shut the fuck up. Like that was funny, you know.
Yeah. Nah,
And like it takes comedians like him and Dave Chappelle to be like, nah, man, you're not censoring me. I'm gonna talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about.
but it's also consistent with his character because he's proven to us over the years that he is a man of his word and he
Yeah,
doesn't give a shit about his uh, lovely white lady's opinion, which
yeah.
I so our white lady audience members out there, we love you.
My white bitches. That's what he said. So funny.
That's what he said to call you. But I'm like, okay, yeah. So, well, man, how do you feel about that?
Very,
exercise.
very good. Yeah. Definitely. It's very simple. Just two questions like, what do you like to joke about, and why should they care that you like to joke about that? Very simple exercise, and it gives me direction because one, it gives me narrative, right? So, oh, I can talk about how, I my best friend and how we bonded, or I could talk about my parents and how we did that. So it gives me narrative, and then two, it gives me a point of view as well, because I'm just like, well, fuck the liberals. I don't think they're right at all, you know. So.
That's what you think.
Yeah, right.
Well, I feel like we've cracked out a really good episode for our viewers.
I think so too, man. Thank
This
you
is
for getting out of bed.
so it's a pleasure, my man. We
Yeah.
do it with a podcast. This would be number what, 6?
7, 8, I think
Seven,
8 maybe. Yeah.
8. Well, we're gonna write it down on the title anyway. This is Gombakomba and me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk to you guys later. Oh shit.
Wow.
Wait, wait, what the hell? Stop.